Okay, so first week with a new camera. We'll see how this works. And yeah, first week doing it here at my house. So woo! Never done it here before. All right. Actually, I can just put this right in here. We are in Luke 15. And we've been doing pretty good at doing one chapter per week. So I'd like to try and get one chapter done this week.
Yeah, cool.
But we will probably have to hurry a little bit just because the last part of this chapter is a very famous story. This is the chapter of lost things, is what it's commonly called. You have the lost sheep, you have the lost coin, and then you have the lost son, which is actually, we usually call it the prodigal son.
The prodigal son, yeah, but lost as well. That makes
Yes.
sense.
Probably better, it would be called the forgiving father.
Yes.
If you're looking at what the story is actually about, or even the lost sons, because both of them have some real issues, and the story is at least as much about the other brother as it is about the prodigal.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the prodigal son has actually been called the world's best short story by a number of people.
Wow.
It has been acclaimed as the best short story ever written, which I thought was pretty cool.
That
It's
makes sense, yeah.
in a lot of different cultures and languages too. They have stories that mimic it.
Wow.
So yeah, that's quite
cool.
interesting. All right, starting at verse 1. Then all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him to hear him. And the Pharisees and scribes complained, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." Okay, so starting here, Jesus just winnowed the ranks in his last pericope. Pericope is the word that we use for the section of the Bible. And in the last section, he just winnowed the ranks. He told everybody, go away. He said, if you can't be willing to hate your life, hate your family, hate your everything, if you can't be willing to leave it all behind you, you need to go away. And presumably a lot of people did, because he had a huge crowd following him. He periodically did this, where he would just tell everybody to go away. Anybody who was not willing to pay the cost of discipleship, you need to leave. And every time that he did that, he made this crowd a little bit less. And then, of course, more people gained, and more people came. And then, yes. Hi! So he had just winnowed the ranks and told everybody to go away. So now all of those who are drawing near to him in this verse 1 are the tax collectors and the sinners. The sinners, the tax collectors, are the wealthy people. They are wealthy people, but they are incredibly isolated. So when Jesus says things like, leave your family, leave your wife, you have to be willing to, he didn't say leave them, but he says, you have to be willing to put me before everything else. They're like, all we got is money. We really don't have any people that really care about us. So what do we really have to lose? This person actually cares about us. It's the first person ever who's really cared about us. Of course we're going to follow him. So they do. The sinner is a technical term actually that was used by the religious elite for people who had given up on trying to follow the law. The law was very intricate in how it was interpreted. So by the time that Jesus was around, they had the basic law of Moses, and then they had all of these laws that were trying to interpret the law of Moses and trying to apply it. And these laws were sometimes very, very oppressive. We've talked about how oppressive it really is with, what knots you're allowed to tie to keep your animal from running off. Some of these laws were extremely oppressive, and some people just said, I give up. I can't do it. I'm not even going to try anymore. I love God, but no, not doing this anymore. And those were the sinners. That was the technical term that the religious elite used to them. So they have now found acceptance with somebody that they have never felt that kind of acceptance with. And so they are also very willing to whatever I have to give up for the kingdom. I don't care. I just want to keep following. So these are the only people who are left. The religious elite have all kind of gone their way. And now we have the tax collectors and the sinners drawing near to him. And the Pharisees and scribes are complaining because it's actually forbidden, particularly for the Pharisees, to associate with these people. It's not just a matter of haughty attitude, like, oh, we're better than them. There probably was that as well. But in that oral law that we mentioned, with all of the oppressive laws in it, is actually forbidden to associate with sinners. Because it actually says, let not a man associate with the wicked, not even to bring him to the law. So you have to stay away from him so that you don't get influenced by him, which is a good idea for, as a general rule. Don't hang around at the bar all the time. If you want to be influenced by Christians, then go be influenced by Christians. Don't hang around with the people who... But they were actually forbidden from associating with them at all through their law. So verse 3, so he spoke this parable to them, saying, what man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost. I say to you that likewise there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 just persons who need no repentance. Okay, we've all heard this parable before. And God is the shepherd who goes after the one who is lost, and will bring him back into the fold. We've all heard this. I had a problem with that in my own walk, because my walk with God has never been a rebellious one. I never went through, I didn't have a life before Christ that I had to come to Christ. I was born into covenant. I grew up knowing God, and I ended up, just progressing. And I never had a point at which I walked away and became a lost sheep. So I was one of the 99 that God just leaves out there in the wilderness to go chasing after this one. And I had a bit of a problem with that. So what I'm going to suggest is a different way of reading this. This is not to say that the way that we have always heard it is wrong, because it is not. It is accurate. But there is also another way of reading it, which is the way that I'd like to talk about today. And it is from the historical perspective of what the people could have potentially been hearing, that the actions that are done here and how they may have interpreted it. I am not saying that this is the only way to interpret it. I'm not even saying that this is the best way to interpret it. But we all know the way that it's normally interpreted. So this is a different way of interpreting it that is still true to the text. Okay, so first of all, he's talking about herdsmen. And there is a question of why he's talking to herdsmen, or talking to Pharisees about herdsmen, because Pharisees would have considered herdsmen a much lower class of society that they didn't really associate with. So the guy who points this out, Jeremias, he is one of the leading scholars for talking about the parables. He says that probably this introduction, sticking this with Mark's little thing about the Pharisees at the beginning, was Luke's doing, and that he got the rest of this tradition from somewhere else. And that somebody who didn't understand the social structure at the time put the two together. But there's another possibility that actually he deliberately addresses the Pharisees as shepherds in order to kind of shock their sensibilities and tell them, hey, you guys, what man of you being a shepherd, and make them go, oh, I'm not a shepherd. And to make them think of themselves as the shepherd in this story. So who we're being asked to identify with at this is a shepherd. We are being asked to identify as the shepherd. We're not being asked to identify as the lost sheep, or even one of the 99. We're being asked to identify as the shepherd. So what does he do? He has this missing lamb. Jesus' original audience would have had a very much different it could have had a very much different interpretation. For one thing, the man is never actually called a shepherd, which is a point. He's just a man. What man of you having 100 sheep? So you are a man who has 100 sheep. Have you been trained as a shepherd? Have you been trained on how to shepherd sheep? Because you lost one. And that's not what a good shepherd, let alone the good shepherd, does. You don't lose your sheep. That's not a good idea. And again, the original audience is not identifying as the sheep. They're identifying as a sheep owner going, oh my gosh, I just lost a sheep. And that makes the parable a bit of a hard saying, something completely ludicrous. As sheep herders today will tell you, leaving 99 sheep in a wilderness to go looking for one is not a smart move because bad things happen to 99 untended sheep. And some scholars will say that, well, it's obviously presupposed that the sheep are left in the hands of a helper. Well, for one thing, that's not obvious. It is not obvious. It's not stated. And for another thing, in Jesus' parables elsewhere, he talks about how the helper won't necessarily take care of the sheep the way that the shepherd does. So still, even leaving the sheep with a helper is still allowing them to potentially come to harm, so that he can be somewhere else. And furthermore, if a sheep is in a habit of wandering off, what they actually will usually do with it, first they will, of course, as we've probably heard before, they break its legs and put it over their shoulders so that it doesn't run off again. But if by chance it should ever do that again, they kill it. Because a sheep that wanders off will lead all the other sheep to wander off. And so better to lose the one sheep and get a good meal out of it than to end up losing half of your flock leading off these other sheep. So, okay, you lost this sheep. Oops, you went and found it. You left 99 other sheep alone to go and find this sheep, and then you come back and tell all your friends, you call them all up and say, hey, look, I did a stupid thing, but then I did an even stupider thing to make it right, and it all worked out in the end. And your friends then go, what is wrong with you? And if you see it that way, then the point becomes clearer. The way that God does things to us can sometimes seem completely ludicrous. We would look at this as being completely counter to the wisdom of man. You don't do something like this. You don't leave 99 sheep to go running after one. And likewise, tying it back into the first part here, man's wisdom says don't associate with sinners. That's good advice, but it's not the way that God does things. He uses the foolish things to confound the wise. And wisdom is great, except when it's not. So this is actually, to me, this is Jesus discussing their use of a wise teaching and how God can do it differently. And it hits even harder when you realize that in their oral law, in the Talmud, they actually have passages in there about God rejoicing over the downfall of the godless, and that he's pleased when the wicked come to nothing. So this would have been really, really hard for them to choke down. Okay, so then Jesus gives another one in verse 8. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls her friends and neighbors together, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I lost. Likewise, I say to you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Okay, and just very quickly with this one, one thing about a foolish shepherd that let the sheep get away, and God do the same thing, is that they both know when one sheep among 100 has been lost. He knew that there was a sheep missing, and that's important. And again, this woman here also, she knows there's something missing. How does she know? She counted. She counts them. She makes sure that everyone is accounted for. And that tells when the sheep or when the coin is being not there. Here again, in the second parable, counting is important. These coins that she has are probably her dowry. They would have been contributed by her family or even all of the people in the village. If she is a poor woman, then the whole village would get together to pool her a dowry, and they would give her these 10 coins. That was the standard price for a woman who was poor. It's a day's wage. These coins would have been a day's wage. So 10 days' wages would have been how much is there. And it's actually been suggested by a number of scholars that it was probably worn in a headdress, but we don't actually have any definitive proof of that. It's something that's been going around that we've been talking about for a very long time, but we haven't actually found one because, of course, cloth disintegrates and it's hard to find one. Okay, so she finds it. And then she calls everyone. And the question is, why does she call everyone? Why does everybody care? She's the one who lost the coin to begin with, which is, again, not a very godlike thing to do. So it is, again, a bit tongue-in-cheek that she is calling everybody. And just like the shepherd did. So, but the theme that is gone is between the two of them. That is the same as that they counted. And now we have another story. We're getting into the parable of the prodigal son, which we call this last one, of a man who also the father, the good father, which is the forgiving father, is what this is sometimes, I think, better titled. The parable of the forgiving father who has 2 sons. And in my opinion, doesn't count them very well. He's lost track of his 2 sons. So, okay, the parable of the prodigal son. What is a prodigal? What does prodigal mean?
I don't know.
Wasteful.
Wasteful. Yes, wasteful. It does not mean immoral. There is no indication that this son, was immoral in any way, except that the other brother accuses him of being. But there's no indication that he actually was. He was stupid with money, which we'll see very early on. He does not know what to do with money. But there's no indication that he was immoral. There's no indication that he was a bad kid. He was just a kid trying to do it his own way and going about it the wrong way. So, and as we read, we're going to read it all the way through, and then we're going to go back and talk about it. As we read, we need to think about whose behavior is really the focus of the story. Who are we meant to identify with? Because in most parables, we're meant to identify with one of the characters. And that happens even in, books and stories today. They might be written in first person, they might be written in third person, but always there's somebody that you really identify in what you're reading. And the main character. So who is the main character in this story? All right, starting at verse 11. Then he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possession with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, "Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found," and they began to be merry. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf." But he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, "Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I have never transgressed your commandment at any time, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you were always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found." Okay. So, the social context of what he's saying to his father here at the beginning, this younger son, says, "Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me." Basically what he's saying is, you're as good as dead to me. I wish you were dead because I would then have your stuff. And so the social context, he's not so great. The legal context of what he's saying is a little bit more complex. The elder son would have gotten 2/3 of the estate, a double portion. The younger son would expect 1/3 upon the death of his father. But since the father is not dead, he actually gets reduced to not receive 1/3. He's going to receive 2/9 to be precise. So significantly reduced of the estate. So by asking for it now, he strips himself of any right, any further claims to the father's estate, whether for the rest of his 1/3 or for any additional assets that might be acquired by the father, before his death. So this is actually really a stupid financial move here. Already this guy is not handling his finances very well, very, very brightly. So the father divides his estate to them. So the younger son gets his portion, his reduced portion, and the older son pretty much gets the rest. He divides to them. So he goes ahead and settles his estate. And who owns the farm now? The older son owns the farm. Okay. So he liquidated, the younger son gathered all together. He liquidates all his assets. It's an idiom that is used in Hebrew, or in Aramaic. So his portion of the farm has now been sold. So where's dad living? Dad would be living off of the older son. And the older son is now supporting dad because he's got his inheritance. And the farm, the portion of it that's still there, is being run by the older son. So wasteful, irresponsible living, this guy goes off and blows his money. Maybe he found a really great financial scheme that he was going to invest in and it blew up in his face. He's not real good with money. We've already seen that. So he lost it all. It could have been gambling. It could have been whatever. There's no indication that he was actually doing anything immoral with it as far as like sleeping with harlots. That's not what is actually in the text. So then he loses everything and he joins himself to a citizen of that country. So he essentially sells himself into slavery when he joins himself. He sells himself to a Gentile, which is, and then he is doing a job that is the lowest form of degradation to a Jew. He is feeding pigs. So now he sold himself into slavery, possibly to one of his creditors or just to somebody opportunistic who took the opportunity to enslave him, and he is now feeding pigs. So and in order, if he is actually sold into slavery, he essentially has to kind of like run away in order to go back to his father. Yes. So he goes back, arose and came to his father. And then, while he's a great way off, the father saw him, had compassion, and ran. It was socially unacceptable for a man to run, especially an old man. He has to hike up his skirts and run with his little knobby knees, you know. So, and much less would we expect him to do this for a child who insulted him as badly as this child did. And then, to top it all off, he falls on the neck of a child who smells like pigs. So, he has completely degraded himself in doing this. So then he says to his servants, "Bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet." And notice the son doesn't even get to the point of suggesting his servanthood. He says, you know, "I've sinned against you, and in your sight I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." And then dad says, "Bring out the best robe." Doesn't let him go to the point of, "Can I be your servant?" Dad interrupts him. So he's doesn't even have the opportunity to ask for how he thinks it could be fixed, because dad is already going to fix it. So dad says, "Bring out the best." Really? The best? Where are they going to get this from?
The brothers of the state, yeah.
Yeah. The best robe in the house was given to an honored guest when they arrived for a formal dinner. And it's a symbol of the family's acceptance of this guest. So the homeowner welcomes this person into the family. Okay, so, and then put a ring, a signet ring of whose authority, actually? Are we putting this on there? Yes, dad's. Yeah. But dad's already divided his estate. So, like, dad has the social standing of the one who is respected. But as far as the holdings go, it's his son who is carrying on the family business and the family name. And sandals on his feet. Sandals worn by free men, but not slaves, which is significant, seeing as this guy is actually a runaway slave at this point. he's run away. So he's no longer a slave. We're going to put sandals on his feet. But not only that, inside of a house, the sandals were usually only worn by the homeowner. Everybody else would take their sandals off before they came in. So if you're wearing sandals in your house, it's because you own that house. So he's really going over the top to bring this child back in. And presumably these things, this signet ring and the sandals and the robe, would have still been allowed, the father would have been allowed to keep these things as a symbol of respect, because his elder son isn't a complete idiot who said, "I'd rather you were dead." And so he has allowed him to and wanted him to keep his dignity as the patriarch of the family, and to keep his position and his best robe and his signet ring, and he still is placing him in a place of respect. Okay, so "Bring the fatted calf here and kill it. Let us eat it and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again, was lost and is found." And they began to be merry. So the father, having already divided his inheritance and legally owning nothing, even though he is still socially being respected as the owner, the original audience is going, "Wow, so because of the moral character of the elder son, this man has retained every ounce of respect in his household. That elder son is still respecting his father, and he's doing it right. This father can say to all the servants, 'Go kill the fatted calf,' and they go run to do it, because the elder son has continued to uphold the father is in charge. Do what he says. If he tells you to do something, you do it, even though legally speaking, he's the one who now owns everything. And the older son was in the field." Now immediately we see a problem with this. Why did nobody get him and tell him about this big feast? Killing a fatted calf and preparing it is not something you do in 5 minutes. This has been going on for a while, and nobody decided to get the older son. We left him out in the field doing his job. They just let him finish? You know, what's going on here? Why did the father not count? You got a son missing. We've got the prodigal son came back. Where's the other one? So the son actually ends up having to summon one of the slaves to find out what's going on. And he doesn't even ask his father. He summons one of the slaves. He doesn't ask his father. And there's no indication that he goes looking for his father either. There is something very broken in the relationship between the elder son and the father. Because not only did the father forget to call him in, but the younger son doesn't go looking for him. He goes and finds a slave to ask what's going on and doesn't go to the father. So there's something broken. The audience that has seen, you know, hey, this great elder son is still respecting his father, they're now going, there's something not right. Why this should be a beautiful, healthy relationship here. You know, regardless of how the older son feels about the younger son, there should be this beautiful, healthy relationship between these two men. Why isn't that there? There's something really missing. Something very broken. Okay, so he was angry and would not go in. Why is he angry? Well, let's count the ways. Brother made a social statement that he wishes God was dead, or wishes dad was dead. That's like embarrassing. You ever had that member of the family who's like the embarrassment and you go, oh my gosh, I don't know that one. Yeah. That's the younger brother. So socially embarrassing. And then dad debases himself by splitting up the inheritance early as if to honor the frankly abusive suggestion that he should be dead. So now we have, you know, have you ever been in the situation where somebody that you love is being abused and you're watching them get abused and they're going, oh, well, you know, it's the way that person is and I still love them and, you know, they'll change, you know, and you're watching this from the outside and going, it makes you so angry because you know that this person doesn't deserve to be treated like this, but they're just getting treated like that and they won't defend themselves for whatever reason. Okay, so that's reason number 2. And then reason number 3, brother just skipped out on all of his responsibilities at the farm. So somebody else has to now take over those responsibilities, and it's going to be the elder son. So the elder son now has to take over all of the responsibilities from the younger son who is not doing what he is supposed to be doing. So now brother shows up again, destitute, because he's a complete idiot. And we again have this, you know, I'm ashamed to be related to that moron. How did he waste all of his income? And now that he's back, he's been welcomed as a son again. And exactly who is supposed to take care of him? Especially after dad dies.
Yeah.
What is he supposed to do? And he has no inheritance, and clearly, by the fact that he left in the first place, no work ethic. And he lost all this money, so he's bad with finances, he doesn't have a work ethic, and he has no inheritance. He's just become a big fat problem for the elder son, that the elder son is going to have to deal with after dad dies. So he is not really happy. And then we get the kicker. As soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. The kicker is you love him more than you love me. I've done everything right, and he's done everything wrong, and you love him more than you love me. So, how does the father respond to this? And you kind of wonder, like, is the father oblivious to this all going on with the elder son? You know, that this relationship being broken, it's kind of, I feel bad for this father because it's like, you know, he's doing what he thinks the sons, not necessarily what's best for them, but he's doing what he thinks that they want. And yeah, okay, the older son doesn't want him dead, but I mean, he's getting a good deal out of this. He's getting a lot of inheritance, and he's getting it early. You know, he's doing very, very well. But you know, he seems very almost confused by why this older son has a problem. He lost track of the older son and didn't even call him in. And he just seems sort of confused as to why this older son is so offended. And you really kind of wonder how badly broken was that relationship that he didn't count his two sons and know that there was one who was missing. But he said to him, "Son, you're always with me, and all that I have is yours." And that's the point. It's all yours. Did you ever ask me for a goat to make merry with your friends? That's what everybody, you know, points out about this, is he never asked, because of course if he had asked, he would have gotten the goat. But it's more than that. He didn't have to ask. The goats were his. He owned the goats. He already got the inheritance. He owns the farm. Every one of those goats is his. If he wants to kill one and have fun with his friends, he can do it. If he wants to kill the fatted calf and have fun with his friends, he can do it. He can do anything he wants. The farm is his. But the elder son still sees himself as a slave. Lo, these many years I have been serving you, obeying your commands. You never gave me a goat. This is servitude. This is not the position that this older son is actually in. The position that this older son is actually in, he has a lot of influence, a lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of everything. He's got everything, and he doesn't even see it because he's fixated on the brokenness in his relationship with his father. It's not even the relationship with the brother. It's the relationship with the father that he's so broken. He can't even see what he has because all he can see is the negative. And then, it was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again and was lost and is found. And then suddenly the parable's over. We don't know how the relationship progresses, whether between the two brothers or between the father and the elder son. It's done. And it leaves you with this really unsettling feeling of, how do you fix this? You know, when something is that badly broken, you know, how do you fix that? So back to the counting motif, the elder son was mentioned at the outset, and then he disappears all the way to the end of the story. And why even mention him at the beginning? Well, the father didn't count his two sons, and in his joy over the son who had returned, he didn't count to realize that he had two sons, not just one. He had two. And one of them... Hi, Justin.
Good on you.
The father had two sons. And one of them, the one who was there and doing all of the work and hadn't been a problem, was missing from the celebration. So, in a way, the moral of the story is simply that people matter. Back to the beginning of this chapter, when we're talking about the sinners and the tax collectors, and why would you associate with them? They matter. People matter. Every single one matters. Count them all. Make sure they are all there. Whether they be a good thing, a good person, like a coin, is a good thing. Whether they be a bad thing or a bad, frustrating thing, like an angry son with whom your relationship is very badly damaged, or whether it be an indifferent thing like a mindless sheep. Count the good, the bad, and the ugly. Count all of it to make sure that everything that is in your realm of what you should be taking care of, you are taking care of it. So, that's the end of chapter 15. Welcome, we're done.